Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the PoliSci Pod. I'm Emma,
And I'm Melat.
and we're back with episode 2.
Yay.
Yay! This episode we're going to be talking about everything about courses, our
Exactly.
favorites, what we recommend, some tips for registering for classes, things like that.
Yep, yep. Very exciting. We love classes.
Obviously.
Don't play. Okay, so Emma, what are some of your favorite classes?
Good question, Maylot. Some of my favorite poli-sci classes would have to be, well, one of them, I guess I'll start out with, would be POL 4891, The Politics of Nuclear Weapons, taught by Professor Bell. It's a really good class. It's obviously all about nuclear weapons, the history of nuclear proliferation, what like current kind of events, things like that. I took it and I'd never taken a class on like militarization or even just an international relations class in general. And it was really cool. I would say if you're kind of in the same boat, if you want to take it but you've never taken international relations, you definitely can. It's a very digestible class. It's taught really well. Really good like mixture of lecture and discussion. Not like too like assignment heavy essays or tests and quizzes. Maylot and I took it together, so that was fun. And there's like a big simulation at the end, which is really cool. You get put into a group of other students and you get assigned a country and you basically like role play as that country for 2 weeks. Is that bad to say?
No,
Okay,
that was
great.
good.
Okay, great. Um, you and you kind of act as that country for 2 weeks, and you basically interact with other countries as well and try to stop nuclear warfare. And it's fun. It was a really cool class. I recommend it. Another class that I recommend would be POL 3451W, which is the politics of New Europe and the EU. It's really cool. I've always been interested in European history and politics, and it fits right in with that. It's all about the conception of the EU and where the EU stands today and like big challenges towards the EU, like Brexit. It's really cool. It is a writing intensive class, but it's not super writing intensive. There's two essays, a book review on a really, really good book. Maylot and I
Yeah.
also have taken this class. Maylot says it's the best book she's ever read.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I said that statement, so of
So,
course
of
I
course.
stand by
So
it.
I'm quoting her.
But yeah, best book, like if you really want to read about authoritarianism and how like the rise of authoritarianism has been
Mm.
happening throughout Europe, like very, very good book.
Yeah, it's a really applicable class to like this
Mhm.
current point in time in like US and global politics. But yeah, I really recommend it. And then another class that I really recommend if you are interested in research at all is PLL 3085, Quantitative Analysis in Political Science. I took it because I was really interested in research freshman year. You get direct guidance on all the steps of a research project. So coming up with a topic, um, basic research using R, which is a coding platform, things like that. You do a project at the end. It's totally a topic of your choosing, which is really cool. There's like a lecture and a lab section, so you get direct help during the lab section. And it also counts towards the mathematical thinking libed. So I took it for my math class, and there was really no math. It's really just like basic stats. And I have never taken a stats class before, and it was easy. So those are the classes that I recommend. Melat, what are the classes that you recommend?
Yeah, so bear with me when I start like saying a bunch of numbers. But the first classes, like the first group of classes that I would recommend is for students that are thinking about going to law school. Both Emma and I have either taken them or are considering law school. So these are classes that we think are very interesting as well. So the first three for my law students or my future law students is POL 3309, 4501, and 4502. 4501 and 4502 are both writing intensive courses, but again, like most, I feel like writing intensive, they're not actually like too bad. I recommend these classes because they're all about the Supreme Court. So you just in 3309, you get a lot of like introduction to the Supreme Court politics and just like the relationships between the justices and how that influences like their decisions, their ideology, their background, and like just how important like they are to like shaping the law of, the United States of America. Um, so yeah, and then 4501 and 4502 are really important because in those classes you learn how to like read cases, like decisions made by the Supreme Court, so like opinions and also like how to write briefs on cases, which I think is really important if you're thinking about going to law school. Just because like a lot of people don't really learn how to write briefs right before going. So this is like really great for that to just kind of like get those skills that you would need eventually anyways. So yeah, those groups I really recommend and then another group of classes that I recommend for people that are interested about learning about politics outside of like the US is Paul 3435, or it might be 3431. I'm not really quite sure. And then Paul 3451W, which is the New Europe class that Emma recommended. But the first class, 3435 or 3431, sorry, is like the politics of the Horn of Africa. So that's like really different. Like it's not America centered at all. I mean, there are like Western influences on those politics, obviously, like those countries, but it's a very good class to just kind of get perspectives from different types of governments and politics going around the world. And yeah. And then 3451W, like obviously like every reason Emma said, it's a really good class, really teaches you about Europe and like learning about the trends of like Europe really helps to understand also American politics overall. So I think it's a very good class. And then another class I recommend is Paul 3306, which is the presidential leadership class. I just thought this class was really fun. It was fun learning about presidents. I think we all know about presidents, but just like learning more about them. They're just very intriguing people because like what made you want to become president? Like I just feel like that's a very interesting thing to learn, like the psychology behind these people.
Sure.
Um, so really recommend that class. The professor is really good. His name is Timothy Collins, and he's just a very funny person too. And I just like when my professors are funny, so very recommended. Yeah. And then also nuclear weapons course that Emma mentioned earlier, Paul 4891. I really recommend that. Same reason. The simulation was really fun. I loved going around talking about nuclear weapons as if I was a country. But definitely, guys, do not wage war at the end.
Yeah.
Don't wage don't wage war, might have waged war and might have not done well. So
Yeah, because you were Russia?
yes, I was Russia.
Yeah, I was the US.
Yeah, we were enemies and it was really sad.
It's really, really sad.
But they like me. But yeah, those are the classes I recommend. But yeah,
Now, Melat, tips or tricks that you have for registering for classes that you think students need to know?
okay. That's actually a really good question. I think the first most important tip for registration is to register on time. I know like procrastinating is very fun. I also love to do that. It's my favorite hobby even. But don't register. I mean, don't procrastinate registration. Like it's very important. Like not getting into classes is actually really devastating, especially if you were really looking forward to that class and like you were excited for it. It's really sad when it fills up like before your registration time. So especially for those of you that are seniors, like the capstone is really important. So really, really make sure that you register on time. So if your registration date is today and it's like at 3, be on there at 3 in your shopping cart ready to register. With that being said, another tip that I do have is that you always come with a plan for registration days. So that means like you come with a planned out schedule. Make sure you plan out your schedule on Schedule Builder and then you send it to your shopping cart prior to your registration date. So then you have that. It's always good to know like what rough schedule you want. If you need to drop out of a class, you can always do that later in like the coming days, either this semester or like even after next semester begins. So just making sure you have a seat and registering is very important. Always have multiple plans, have backup classes just in case your classes get filled up. So you're not surprised, and then also you're not just like, what do I do? And just freaking out and not having
Mhm.
a backup class. So those are my top two recommendations for registration. But Emma, what are some of your recommendations for students?
Yeah, really great question. Along with Melat's advice, which I think is really, really good. I would say something that I always struggle with around registration time is actually reading the description of classes. I typically just look at the title and the date and time that's offered, and then I'm good to go. But I've a few times taken a class and it's not at all what I thought it was going to be like or what was going to be talked about. So I really recommend reading those full lengthy descriptions on Schedule Builder as well as for your POL classes, looking at our POL syllabi bank, which is linked on our website under the courses tab. There's syllabi in there going back to 2012. It's every class, the syllabi that students directly get. So it gives a really good insight into what a class is like if it's really lecture heavy or discussion heavy, if your attendance is graded, if participation is graded, even just like how many tests and quizzes there are, if they're blue book exams, if they're take-home exams, things like that. So you can kind of plan out more what your classes for the semester will look like. You know, oftentimes, like I've considered taking two writing intensive classes. So looking at actually like how intensive a writing intensive class is, like how many essays there are, things like that can be helpful. So that's what I recommend. Some other things that we recommend generally would be to run an APAS before you register, just to see what you have left, and then also after you register, run an APAS to see if your whatever is left over is blue or green, because that means that you're good to go with your requirements. Especially if you're planning on graduating like that semester, making sure there's no red left on your APAS, that it's
Yeah.
all either blue or green is a good sign. And then, as always, I mean, maybe this is biased, but always check in with your advisors if you have any questions regarding classes. They are like the number one person to go to make sure you're on track with your requirements. Also, um, your peer advisors are a really good resource if you don't know what classes to take because odds are they've taken a lot of the classes or they've heard a lot about what different classes are like. So they are a really good resource as well. Um, but those are all my kind of tips and all I have to say. Do you have anything else to add, Melat?
Not really, but just to add on, like talking to your advisors, even if you think it's like a small thing to come to advisors with, like if you have a made schedule, you could just come here and show us your schedule and we can look at it and be like, it's good. I always say like it's better that you get a confirmation that something is good and like looking perfect, especially if you're graduating and you're a senior, rather than just you thinking that something is already perfect and then you find out later in the semester that it's not. So, yeah, just restating
Yeah.
that it's important to meet with your advisors about that. But
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of my favorite things to meet with students and talk about is
Mhm.
like potential classes or like a class
Yeah.
schedule. It's always like fun to talk about classes and look at them. But yeah, those are our tips and tricks and some of our favorite classes that we've taken.
Mhm.
If you have any questions, you can always email us or reach out.
Exactly.
And yeah,
But
well,
yeah.
this is episode 2 of the PoliSci Pod.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. We love you.
We love you.
Our fans.
Okay, see you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.